Need a new playmat? Playing with Power MTG now has merchandise. Go to playingwithpowermtg.com to order playmats and t-shirts, with more merch on the way. All sales help us grow the channel. You can also support us by purchasing on TCG Player through our affiliate links in the description. We love TCG Player because it gives the best prices online and still supports local game stores. Finally, you can support us directly through Patreon. You'll get access to our community, early access to videos, and even exclusive videos not available anywhere else. More info is in the description. Thanks for watching. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Playing with Power MTG, where we play with the most powerful cards in the most powerful formats. Another round is here and we are bringing a spicy build to the table. Mike has always argued that Lord Windgrace could be a viable CEDH commander, but none of the rest believed him. So we had him build it to the best that he could and bring it to the table. So let's see how it does tonight. We wanted to announce that we will be at the DDM Gaming Competitive EDH 1K Championship this upcoming May the 2nd at the Bearded Dragon Games in New Jersey. We encourage you to sign up and battle us in the tournament, or just drop by and say hi. As a special treat, we will be recording the Final Four of the tournament to be featured in an upcoming episode of Playing with Power. Go to ddmgaming.com to get more details and sign up. We wanted to also give a quick shout out to our patrons for their support. We have big plans for content this year, and we rely on direct support from people just like yourselves in order to bring this content to you. If you feel like you would like to contribute even just $2 a month, you will get so much in return. More info is in the description. Thank you again to all who support us. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Mike piloting Lord Windgrace. This deck is a stacks deck that uses land destruction and the land recursion through Windgrace to break parity on the board. Mike's opening hand contains a Mana Crypt, Priest of Titania, Force of Vigor, Exploration, Abrupt Decay, Caustic Caterpillar, and a Forest. Next, we have Garrett bringing the 3-color pairing of Thrasios Triton Hero and Silas Wren, Seeker Adept. This deck is a graveyard deck looking to increase advantage through Silas Wren and attempt to combo off for the win. Garrett's opening hand contains a Watery Grave, Counterspell, Limdul's Vault, Force of Negation, Talisman of Dominance, Mox Diamond, and a Flooded Strand. After that, we have Ryan piloting Breya, Ethereum Shaper. This deck is a Doomsday build looking to execute the Doomsday line and go infinite for the win. Ryan's opening hand contains the Gemstone Caverns, Bazaar of Baghdad, Talisman of Dominance, Mana Crypt, Frantic Search, Talisman of Hierarchy, and a Mana Vault. Finally, we have Folger piloting Inalla, Archmage Ritualist. This deck is an adaptive deck looking to gain value off of Inalla's Eminence and go infinite with Wanderwine Prophets. Folger's opening hand contains a Polluted Delta, Izzet Charm, Necromancy, Pongify, Dak Baden, and 2 islands. Without further ado, let's kick off this ghastly get-together of gratifying generous gameplay. Ryan wins the Tin Can Challenge and gets to start us off. But he's not too happy about it because his opening hand contains a Gemstone Caverns. Ryan plays a Gemstone Caverns for turn. He casts a Mana Crypt. He casts a Mana Vault. He follows up with a Talisman of Dominance and a Talisman of Hierarchy. All ramped up already, Ryan passes. Folger plays a Polluted Delta and, underwhelmingly, passes the turn. Mike plays a Forest for turn. He also casts a Mana Crypt. He casts a Soul Ring. He then casts Priest of Titania. With a turn 1 rivaling Ryan's, Mike ends his turn. Garrett plays a Flooded Strand for turn. He casts a Mox Diamond, discarding a Watery Grave. He cracks his Flooded Strand for a Tropical Island. He also casts a Talisman of Dominance and gives the turn to Ryan. During his upkeep, Ryan pays 4 to untap his Mana Vault. Also in his upkeep, he loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He plays a Wooded Foothills for turn. He ends his turn. At the end of Ryan's turn, Folger cracks his Polluted Delta for a Blood Crypt into play tapped. Folger plays an island for turn and passes. During his upkeep, Mike loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He casts a Deathrite Shaman. He passes. At the end of Mike's turn, Garrett cycles the Lonely Sandbar to draw a card. Also in the end step, Mike casts Force of Vigor, targeting Garrett's Mox Diamond and Ryan's Mana Vault. In response, Ryan cracks his Wooded Foothills for a Volcanic Island. He then taps his Mana Vault to cast Frantic Search, drawing 2, discarding 2, and untapping 2 lands. Another round of priority passes, and Garrett casts Force of Negation. exiling a blue card and targeting Mike's Force of Vigor. Folger responds by casting Is It Charm, targeting Garrett's Force of Negation. Force of Negation is countered, Vigor resolves, and both artifacts are destroyed. Then the turn moves to Garrett. During his upkeep, Garrett casts Limdol's Vault. He looks at the top 5, likes what he sees, and rearranges them. In his main phase, he pays 2 life and casts Gitaxian Probe, targeting Folger. He looks at Folger's hand and draws a card. He casts Urza's Bauble. He cracks it to look at a card in Ryan's hand. Garrett passes. At the end of Garrett's turn, Ryan casts Wear, targeting Mike's Soul Ring. During Ryan's upkeep, Garrett draws a card through Urza's Bauble. Ryan starts off his turn by casting Preordained, scrying 2, and drawing a card. He casts Sensei's Divining Top. He pays 1 to activate the top and look at the top 3 of his library. Finished up, he passes the turn. On his turn, Folger casts a Mox Diamond, discarding an island. He casts Dak Faden. Mike bargains with Folger that if he doesn't steal his Mana Crypt with Dak, Mike won't kill Dak on his turn. Folger agrees and Dak resolves. He activates Dak, gaining control of Ryan's Mana Crypt. Folger ends his turn. During his upkeep, Mike loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He plays a Caustic Caterpillar for turn and passes. Garrett plays an island for turn. He casts a Talisman of Curiosity. He taps his Talisman to cast his commander, Silas Wren. Garrett ends his turn. Ryan plays a Polluted Delta for turn. He cracks it for a plateau. He taps both of his Talismans to cast his commander, Breya, Ethereum Shaper. Breya enters and Ryan creates 2 1/1 Thopters. With nothing else, Ryan ends his turn. During his upkeep, Folger loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He activates Dak's first ability, drawing 2 and discarding 2. He passes. At the end of Folger's turn, Mike taps Deathrite Shaman for mana, exiling a land from Garrett's graveyard, and sacks his Caustic Caterpillar to blow up Folger's Mana Crypt. During his upkeep, Mike loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He looks at his hand, decides to hold up mana, and passes the turn. Garrett starts off his turn by attacking Folger with Silas. Folger takes a hit, and in his second main phase, Garrett casts Urza's Bauble from his graveyard. He cracks his Bauble again to look at a card in Ryan's hand. Garrett passes. At the end of Garrett's turn, Ryan spends the top. During Ryan's upkeep, Garrett draws a card through Urza's Bauble. In his main phase, Ryan casts Dak Faden. He activates Dak, gaining control of Garrett's commander, Silas. And because his Dak is the only Dak who should be on the battlefield, Ryan attacks Folger's Dak with Breya. In response, not wanting to lose his Dak, Folger casts Pongify, targeting Breya. In response, Garrett hard casts Force of Will. In response, Folger casts Spell Pierce. In response, Ryan activates Breya, sacking herself and a Thopter and dealing 4 damage to Dak, killing it. All through, and with Dak by his side, Ryan passes the turn. Folger draws a card, yearns for his long-lost Dak, and passes the turn. During his upkeep, Mike loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He plays a Badlands for turn. He activates Deathrite Shaman for mana, exiling a land from Garrett's graveyard. He casts his commander, Lord Windgrace. In response, Folger casts Mana Drain, countering the spell. All through, Mike passes. On his turn, Garrett casts Mystic Remora. He taps his Talisman to cast Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. He activates his Jace, milling himself and drawing a card. Garrett passes. Ryan starts off his turn by activating Dak, drawing 2 and discarding 2. He attacks Garrett with Silas. Garrett takes a hit, and in his second main phase, Ryan casts Mana Crypt through Silas. Garrett's Mystic Remora goes onto the stack, and in response, Ryan flashes in a Notion Thief. Notion Thief resolves, Garrett neglects to draw, and Mana Crypt resolves. All through, Ryan passes. Folger plays a Strip Mine for turn. He uses some of his Mana Drain mana to cast his commander, Inalla, Archmage Ritualist. Folger ends his turn. During his upkeep, Mike loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He does nothing else and passes the turn. During his upkeep, determined to get a draw off of his fish, Garrett pays for his Mystic Remora. He casts a Carpet of Flowers. He moves to a second main phase and adds 1 blue through his carpet. He casts his other commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. Garrett passes the turn to Ryan. During his upkeep, Ryan loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. Since Notion Thief is on the board, he decides to activate Dak's first ability, targeting Mike. In response, Mike casts Pyroblast, targeting Notion Thief. Unfortunately, it resolves, and Mike draws 2 and discards 2. Next, Ryan attacks Mike with Silas. Mike takes the hit, and in his second main phase, Ryan casts Mana Vault from his graveyard through Silas, paying for Garrett's Mystic Remora. All through, Ryan passes. Folger, looking at the board, decides to start off his turn by casting Fire Covenant, paying 9 life. In response, Mike taps his Deathrite Shaman, exiling a land from Garrett's graveyard. With that, all creatures are wiped. Now, since Mike has floating mana, Folger declares he would like to move phases and passes priority. In response, and in order to use his mana, Mike casts Abrupt Decay, targeting Mystic Remora and paying the 4. Mystic Remora is destroyed, and Folger moves to combat. He attacks Dak with Inalla, killing him. Folger ends his turn. During his upkeep, Mike loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He casts a Chrome Mox, exiling Exploration. He plays a Crystal Vein for turn. He sacks his Crystal Vein and casts his commander, Lord Windgrace. He activates Windgrace's first ability, discarding a swamp and drawing 2 cards. Mike passes. Garrett starts off his turn by casting Windfall. Folger feels really bad about it because he had been waiting for a wheel effect and was going to steal Ryan's Notion Thief with a Reanimation Aura, but he had tapped most of his mana in his previous turn. Ryan, knowing he's going to lose it anyway, casts Silence, preventing Garrett from casting any more spells. Windfall resolves, everyone discards their hand and draws 3. Garrett plays a Cephalid Coliseum for turn. He activates Jace, milling himself for 2 and drawing a card. He moves to his second main phase and adds a blue from his Carpet of Flowers. He sacks his Cephalid Coliseum to draw 3 and discard 3. With nothing else to do, Garrett ends his turn. At the end of Garrett's turn, Ryan spins the top. During his upkeep, Ryan loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He plays a Badlands for turn. He taps his Talisman to cast Grand Abolisher. In response, Garrett taps his Peatland to sink it into Sunken Ruins to cast Brainstorm, looking for an answer. He draws 3, puts 2 back on top, and has no other answers. With that, Grand Abolisher resolves. Ryan passes. Folger starts off his turn by casting Mystic Remora. In response, Garrett taps his Talisman to cast Swan Song, countering the spell and giving Folger a 2/2 bird. He plays an Arid Mesa for turn. He casts a Talisman of Dominance. He attacks Jace with his Inalla. Folger ends his turn. During his upkeep, Mike loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He activates Windgrace's ability, discarding a land and drawing 2. He casts Imperial Seal. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. He plays a Stomping Ground into play tapped and passes the turn to Garrett. Garrett starts off his turn by casting Life from the Loam. He returns Prismatic Vista, Flooded Grove, and Cephalid Coliseum to his hand. He activates Jace, milling 2 and drawing a card, but replaces the draw with a Dredge 3 from Life from the Loam, milling 3 and returning it to his hand. He taps his Peatland to cast Life from the Loam again, returning Wooded Foothills, Breeding Pool, and a snow-covered swamp to his hand. Then, Garrett casts Scroll Rack. Now, seeing what is going on, and seeing that he can replace those newly acquired lands into cards from the top of his library, Ryan responds by casting Delay, exiling the spell with 3 time counters on it. Next, Garrett casts Pongify, targeting Ryan's Grand Abolisher. In response, Ryan spins the top looking for an answer. He does not find one, Grand Abolisher is destroyed, and Ryan creates a 3/3/8. Garrett plays a Wooded Foothills for turn. He cracks it for a Bayou and passes the turn to Ryan. During his upkeep, Ryan loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He taps both of his Talismans and casts Doomsday. He holds priority and activates his Sensei's Top, drawing a card and putting top back on top. Doomsday resolves, Ryan searches up 5 cards from his graveyard and library, stacks them appropriately, exiles the rest of the cards, and loses half of his life. All through, Ryan passes. Folger starts off his turn by seizing an amazing opportunity and casting Wheel of Fortune. Ryan sinks his head, Wheel of Fortune resolves, everyone discards their hand and draws 7, and Ryan loses the game. Folger casts Reanimate, targeting Jin-Jitaxis' Core Augur in his graveyard. Garrett responds by casting Pact of Negation, countering the spell. Folger follows up by casting Dance of the Dead, once again targeting Jin. This time, Dance of the Dead resolves, and Jin-Jitaxis enters. He attacks Jace with Inalla and Mike with his 2/2 bird. He moves to his end step and draws 7 through Jin. He then discards the hand size. During his upkeep, Mike finally doesn't lose his Mana Crypt trigger. In his main phase, he casts Obliterate. Since it can't be countered, Obliterate resolves, blowing up all artifacts, creatures, and lands. Mike activates Lord Windgrace's second ability, returning Bayou and a forest to the battlefield. He plays a command beacon for turn. He casts Collector Oof. He follows up with an Arbor Elf. Completely changing the game in one turn, Mike passes. During Garrett's upkeep, his Pact of Negation trigger goes onto the stack. Since he has no mana to pay for it, Garrett loses the game. Folger plays an island for turn and passes. Mike plays a Windswept Heath for turn. He activates Windgrace's second ability, returning Badlands and a swamp to the battlefield. He then casts Sire of Insanity. Knowing that he cannot escape his fate, Folger concedes the game to Mike. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got to say, that game was tense. There was a lot of good back and forth in this game. There was some tough calls and some misplays, but overall it was a really good game. Congrats to Mike on his win. It was really cool to see Mike's CEDH brew on this popular commander. Mike's strategy to lay low and let the table exchange blows with one another was instrumental in his victory. Laying back and trying not to become the threat ended up being the key to his success. Garrett's deck was always doing something, but it had a lot of trouble getting its footing into something that could close out the game. Getting his commander stolen and getting almost no draws off of Remora really kept him from pulling ahead. Ryan's deck was moving as well, and provided some timely answers to potential threats. His explosive turn 1 allowed him to keep moving the needle until he could cast Doomsday. Unfortunately, without triggering his Doomsday on his turn, it proved to be his end. Folger had trouble getting off of the ground. He missed land drops, and key pieces kept getting removed. Unfortunately, there really wasn't much else he could do to keep up. The player of the game was Ryan. While he may not have won, he provided answers to the table consistently that the other players had to answer. The most valuable card was Dack Vaden. Its ability to steal artifacts can be devastating to a player's strategy. When Ryan attempted to make Mike discard 2 cards while he drew was going to be a complete blowout. This card does so much at such a low CMC. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we will duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.